America's top 8 conservative presidents ever. Number 1. George Washington, first president, 1789 to 1797. The Constitution is the guide which I will never abandon. George Washington to the Boston Selectmen, July 28, 1795. We couldn't leave out the birthday boy. Washington's legendary farewell address forewarned against partisan politics. Washington, in 2 of the most significant shows of executive restraint in American history, voluntarily relinquished power following the War of Independence, and then imposed on himself a limit of 2 terms in the presidency. Washington easily could have accepted the role of an American king, but opted against it. These decisions served as precedents for years, keeping executive power limited. Moreover, Washington's first term is a model for constitutional governance. He kept his power limited to the enumerated powers of the Constitution and refused to overstep his bounds. The Republic has been far better for his example and leadership. Number 2. Thomas Jefferson, third president, 1801 to 1809. A wise and frugal government which shall restrain men from injuring one another shall leave themselves otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement. Thomas Jefferson, first inaugural address, March 4, 1801. The author of the Declaration of Independence advocated states' rights and strongly opposed a centralized federal government. He famously stated that government is best which governs least, because the people discipline themselves. Jefferson knew his role as president was to ensure the federal government did not overstep its authority and to enforce its laws in keeping with the Constitution. He did not want to be the chief legislator or an American monarch. Throughout his term, Jefferson sought to eliminate taxes, rein in wasteful spending, and ensure the judiciary did not grow out of control. His example still serves as a model for small government advocates today. Number 3. James Madison, fourth president, 1809 to 1817. I own myself the friend to a very free system of commerce and hold it as truth that commercial shackles are generally unjust, oppressive, and impolitic. It is also a truth that if industry and labor are left to take their own course, they will generally be directed to those objects which are the most productive, and this in a more certain and direct manner than the wisdom of the most enlightened legislator could point out. James Madison to Congress, April 9, 1789. Madison is known as the father of the Constitution, and his writings in the federal papers have been used by scholars for centuries to determine the proper scope of the federal government's powers. He also, as president, vetoed internal improvement legislation. These bills, while wildly popular, exceeded the government's constitutional authority, and Madison was willing to take the political hit to preserve the document that he fostered in the earliest days of the Republic. It is that kind of political courage that we desperately need in our country today. Madison also carefully navigated the country through its first war as a nation in the War of 1812. He went through the proper procedures and did not limit liberty as a means for security. Number 4. Martin Van Buren, 8th President, 1837 to 1841. The principle that will govern me in the high duty to which my country has called me is a strict adherence to the letter and the spirit of the Constitution as it was designed by those who framed it. Martin Van Buren, first inaugural address, March 4, 1837. Van Buren, a strict constitutionalist, believed that the government had no duty in alleviating private suffering. As a response to the Panic of 1837, the Van Buren Plan consisted of free market policies rather than government intervention, which was a states' rights victory. Van Buren's unwillingness to greatly expand the size of the government to try and stabilize the economy likely cost him re-election in 1840, but he sacrificed himself in the name of upholding his oath to defend the Constitution. Van Buren was also an avid defender of hard currency and thought all government-issued money should be coins or backed by precious metals. He did not believe in the type of wasteful printing that is all too common nowadays. Number 5. John Tyler, 10th President, 1841 to 1845. I am called to the high office of President, understandingly to carry out the principles of that Constitution which I have sworn to protect, preserve, and defend. John Tyler, first inaugural address, April 9, 1841. Tyler was very vocal about the proper use of veto power. When vetoing the Third Bank of the U.S., he told Congress that it would have required him to violate his oath to defend the Constitution to approve of such a venture. He vetoed a tariff bill that he personally liked, on the basis that it was implemented in an unconstitutional manner. Tyler was an ardent states' rights advocate and considered state sovereignty to be the default rule of any constitutional interpretation. This was true over his entire career, as when he was a senator, he was the lone vote against Andrew Jackson's plan to initiate a federal takeover of South Carolina. Number 6. Franklin Pierce, 14th President, 1853 to 1857. Is it not better to rule, to leave all works to private enterprise, regulated, and when expedient, aided by the cooperation of the state? Franklin Pierce, Second Annual Message, December 4, 1854. Pierce strongly advocated a strict interpretation of the Constitution and vetted his cabinet and his judicial nominees to make sure they felt the same way. He vetoed 9 bills believed to be unconstitutional. A strong believer in federalism, he allowed Western states to enter the Union under their own policies. Pierce viewed very little role for the federal government and thought everything should be left to private companies with federal constitution only if absolutely necessary. Pierce showed restraint during the Bleeding Kansas crisis by waiting for congressional approval to dispatch federal troops. Pierce cited the constitutional provision that no state shall be formed within the existing boundaries of another without the expressed approval of the state legislature. This reflects a deep knowledge of the Constitution that was a theme of his presidency. Number 7. Grover Cleveland, 22nd and 24th President, 1885 to 1889 and 1893 to 1897. I pledge to be guided by a just and unstained construction of the Constitution and a careful observance of the distinction between the powers granted to the federal government and those reserved to the states or to the people. Grover Cleveland, first inaugural address, March 4, 1885. Considered to be the last small government Democrat and the last classically liberal, economically speaking, president. Cleveland is the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. He is remembered for fighting corruption, tariffs, high taxes, and imperialism. Preventing waste was a priority, and he dedicated countless hours to ensuring no fraud took place in granting Civil War pensions. He was also a staunch defender of the Constitution and vetoed 414 bills in his first term that he deemed unconstitutional. This was the most ever in one term for a president. Cleveland also believed strongly in separation of powers and made it a point in his first term not to interfere with congressional deliberations. And so, Americans, we've come to the end of this video. Who is your favorite president from our list? What qualities do you look for in an ideal American president? Comment below. Also, if you haven't subscribed to American Truth, then subscribe to American Truth and share this video. Until then, keep watching American Truth.